there. It's like the guys that walked. We talked about this Lee Harvey Oswald out one time and he wasn't hit, and then we'll walk him out again. Those cops are like kind of holding.
Where Ruby failed to shoot him, so they just kept parading him back and forth in front of Ruby.
Just like when Ruby shows up, the guy's like, "Well, there you go." Like,
hey,
there he is.
Yeah, I think if you watch the footage on slow-mo, you can see them lean away before it even happens.
Yeah, they just like, ooh, here comes Ruby right on cue.
Like, why is that cop's head out of the screen? Yeah, so it's insane, but you want to get a little more insane? No. And not only did they allow a dance to go on, but someone, like, investigating for a documentary or something, went into the Audubon Ballroom and looked and was looking around in the 1990s. They went down into the basement, and they found the podium there with bullet holes in it. In the 90s. No one had ever collected the bullet-riddled podium to maybe see what kind of bullets were fired, what angle, from where. Still sitting in the basement. You know, the janitor's like, well, I was going to get to that. I kept thinking I need to deal with that podium.
Look, NYPD's back. They got a 30-year backlog of
podiums of black leaders.
The podiums of black leaders that are providing hard evidence on a murder. Yeah, it's funny. NYPD just every time they're discussed, it's always like they've done such a fantastic job.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're just wonderful. By never taking a serious interest in investigating Malcolm's death, white-run institutions and law enforcement agencies sent the message that they did not value what his life represented. Very clear. FBI, and I'm not even going to get into the garbage media that was printed afterwards, talking about, well, like Time Magazine, New York Times, all of them ran with articles about how much hatred Malcolm X was filled with, and so it came back to bite him. They basically were like cheering it on, like, well, this is what, if you're a thug, this is what happens to you.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. Wait a minute now.
Yeah, his hatred against the completely racist fucking system that has destroyed countless lives, that's wrong. He should have been joyful and happy, really.
Yeah, should have just been grateful for what they gave him.
The FBI at the time, under its infamous COINTELPRO, which stands for Counterintelligence Program, which we've talked about many times, was promoting a war within the Nation of Islam in an attempt to destroy the organization, fearing that Malcolm was a black messiah who would lead a social revolution. And so this, I'm not going to get into the details of that feud in the Nation of Islam. Clearly, some of it was legitimate. Malcolm X being upset with Elijah Muhammad, and, you know, he was living a very rich life. He's driving around in limos. He's got many girlfriends, and to Malcolm X, it just very much seemed like he was a fraud eventually. At first, he very much revered him. But I think...
I want to add this. It's one of the things that I've always found so impressive about Malcolm X. I read the biography, the book of him in the 90s. And it was the thing that I gave him such credit for. He was so devout in his religion that this guy that he revered, when he found out this guy that he revered that was the head of the Nation of Islam, was not living by the Muslim law. He was, like you said, sleeping with girlfriends and his secretaries and living high off the hog. He was like, this ain't right. And he was so firm in his principles that he left this thing that changed his life. I mean, finding Islam is like the most profound moment in Malcolm X's life, it seems like. And that for him to have that is like shows the integrity of the man. And I also believe that both of these things can exist at the same time, where, yes, Elijah Muhammad did these things. Yes, it was legitimate that Malcolm X was like, hey, man, you're not living by our laws, and I'm offended and I'm out of here. And I'm sure the FBI also had people in there mixing it up, making it worse.
Yeah, so I think they would have had a maybe disgruntled but peaceful, shift into Malcolm X not being with the Nation of Islam anymore, if it weren't for the fact that, meanwhile, you had COINTELPRO feeding info to the Nation of Islam about how Malcolm X wanted to destroy them and all this stuff, and you had people feeding info to Malcolm X about Elijah Muhammad trying to kill him, and I think that just ramped everything up to a level where it did get, it did get dangerous. I mean, obviously, with at least Hare and possibly some of the others involved, these were Nation of Islam members that actually fired the gun. So in order to talk them into being willing to do that, you had to kind of ramp up that rift between him and the Nation of Islam in order to make him so hated that killing him seemed to make sense.
Yeah.
But that being said, there's a lot. It's like even if that were the only involvement of the FBI and police enforcement, that would still be too much. Like they still are responsible for Malcolm X's death, even if that were it. But instead, there's a lot more to their involvement.
Yeah.
On the day Malcolm was killed, the FBI had 9 informants in the Audubon ballroom that we know of. During his travels to the Middle East and Africa, CIA agents followed Malcolm's every move. So, well, let me finish this. Boarding every flight he took, watching his hotels, keeping him under surveillance during mealtime, and allegedly trying to poison him twice. But what this speaks to is that there is no way in hell that with all of this going down, they didn't know it was going to go down. So,
right.
At the very least, they were sitting there watching it, watching the assassins come in, watching to make sure the NYPD wasn't around, watching to make sure it all went according to plan, making sure that if he survived the initial bullet wounds, that they would take him to a hospital where they could finish the job. Like, there's no way they didn't know all this was going down, considering they followed his every fucking footstep.
Yeah, I mean, this is coordinated. I mean, honestly, some of this reads of like how the crazy things we tried to do with Fidel Castro that I think we talked about on last week's episode of the week before.
They never gave Malcolm X a scuba suit, so an infected scuba suit.
Yeah, because they couldn't really get inside of Castro's, inner circle. They had to give him a scuba suit. So they got inside. But I mean, it's just like he's followed and tracked and targeted like some foreign